How many of you have never been to an Orange event or never really heard us talk about this at all? Raise your hands. Oh, okay. Well, the reason we use the color orange, we're not Tennessee fans or Auburn or Syracuse, New York. I mean, those are great schools, but the reason we use the color orange is because it's symbolic of basically leveraging our influence as leaders to get parents and leaders on the same page as it relates to the next generation. We feel like the church is represented, by the concept of light. The Bible has called us as a church to illuminate to a generation who God is, who Jesus is. And even in the book of Revelation, John referred to the church as a lamp. And so we use the symbolism of light for the church, and we use the symbolism of unconditional love and heart for the family. And we just think when the church and the family get on the same page, you have a different kind of outcome. And as an Orange leader, all we're simply suggesting and saying is that you are someone who's trying to influence those who influence the faith of the next generation. And those who influence the faith of the next generation are those leaders in the church and those parents in the home. And so we say that because we just want everyone to understand that ultimately, you don't have to buy anything from us. You don't have to use our resources. You don't have to use our curriculum. You don't have to do anything as far as a specific resource to think Orange. The reason we love to be able to have gatherings like this is because we want to talk about the issues that we feel like are relevant to reaching and influencing the next generation. And when you get together in a room like this, we just kind of know that there's a lot of possibilities that can happen. And because we have, I don't know if you're aware of this, we have 16 different denominations here. I mean, 16. I can't even name 16 denominations. And we've got almost 200 churches that are here, and we could have some knockdown, drag-out debates if we wanted to. I mean, we could talk about, are you a 5-point Calvinist? Are you a 4.5-point Calvinist? Where are you? And that's, we could talk about modes of baptism. I mean, do you put under? Do you sprinkle? How long do you hold under? I mean, we could get around a table today at lunch, and I mean, we could just pull out, our theology and flex our theological muscles and try to prove someone else wrong and someone else right, and probably have some arguments and debates about some issues that we really won't figure out who's right until we get to heaven. And the thing that's powerful about us in this room is even with our different theological flares and twists, and even with our different backgrounds and experiences with the church, we're all here because of one thing that kind of connects us all. We all believe that 100 years from now, the only thing that will matter is somebody's relationship with God. And those of you who volunteer, those of you who work on staff, you don't do it because you get big salaries and all kinds of perks. You do it because at the end of the day, you know that there's something more important than kids growing up and believing the right things. There's something more important than kids growing up and having the right values and driving the right kind of car and getting the right kind of education. That at the end of it all, if we don't make sure they understand what it means to have a relationship with God, then all the rest doesn't matter. And that's why I love these kind of gatherings, because we can kind of put a lot of issues on the shelf. We're united by some principles that we're all surrounded by. And here's what we kind of say as an Orange entity, that ultimately our goal is to simply design a strategy that combines the family with the faith community to demonstrate the message of God's story in order to influence the next generation. That sums up everything we will ever talk about. As a matter of fact, you can leave now and go home and kind of understand that everything we're going to talk about, whenever you come to a conference, whenever you come to a one day, whenever you sit down with any of us, will come back to one of these 5 areas. We think it's important for you to think strategically. If you're thinking Orange, it means you're thinking strategically. If you're going to influence the next generation's faith, if you're going to get parents and leaders on the same page, it means you have to think in terms of a strategy. Now, I want to make a couple of statements about strategy for those of you who are new, who've never been a part of what we do. We know that the church has the greatest mission on the planet. And we believe that your church, as a part of the church, has an unbelievable mission. As a matter of fact, I could go probably to your church, and somewhere in your meeting rooms or in your hallway, there's probably a mission statement. And I would think that your mission statement is probably connected to somehow the Great Commission. You have just reworded, you've revamped, you've recrafted a statement, right, that reflects the Great Commission, something Jesus said 2,000 years ago before he ascended and before he left the planet, when he leaned into his disciples and he said, your job is to go around all the world and make disciples. And at North Point, when we started North Point 15 years ago, we decided our mission statement would be leading people into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. That was our mission statement. I know Sue, who was at Willow for 17 or something years, their mission statement was getting irreligious people to become followers of Jesus Christ. Both of those mission statements are crafted different, but they both come back to the Great Commission. And the reason I want to point that out is simply to say this. You have an incredible mission, but your success as a church and as a team of people is not as connected to your mission and not determined by your mission as it is your strategy. You can have a great mission, like 2 or 3 of the churches I passed along the road driving here, whose doors were closed and they were locked and there was a for sale sign in their yard. Ultimately, they had a great mission. The problem was somewhere along the way, they didn't realize how important it was to think strategically. You see, it's not your mission that's ultimately going to determine your success as an individual organization. It is your strategy. Now, when we talk about strategy, we simply mean a strategy is a plan of action with an end in mind. And we're going to spend a lot of time today talking about that. What is the end in mind? What does it look like? As a children's pastor, as a student pastor, as an executive pastor, as an education director, as a family ministry director, as a senior pastor, what is the end in mind? As you look in your church at the kids and the children and the students that are growing up, what is it you hope for them? What is the goal? What is the end in mind? Because a strategy asks and answers the question, what do we want them to become? And then a second question helps you answer the first question. Where do we want them to be to help them become what we want them to become? That ultimately, in your ministry as a leader, you're going to wrestle with these 2 questions, hopefully every week, every month, every year, because it's important for you to define what the end in mind is so that you can back up and begin to work in your team and a strategy to get on the same page to move someone strategically to that end. So you can evaluate your programs, so you can evaluate your messages, so you can evaluate your environment, so you can evaluate the experiences that you create for a child or for a teenager based on that end in mind. That's strategic thinking. And there's so much we could talk about related to that. How you teach, how you put relationships in their life, what kind of experiences you create. Is the process easy for them to understand? Can parents articulate it and get on the same page? We could talk about all kinds of things related to the strategy to get people to an end in mind. But one of the most important things I can say to you is this, that for you to have an effective strategy, for you to be making sure that along the way you're doing what God has called you to do as a team and as a leadership group, you've got to ask yourself the question, are we aligned? Are we on the same page? Are we breaking down the silos that exist sometimes in churches? The thing I love about gatherings like this again is there are some of those of you who are children's pastors, some of you who are student pastors, some of you who are working with preschool. And the thing we love about getting together like this is it gets you around a table to talk about a comprehensive plan and a comprehensive strategy so you understand that what the preschool department or division does is linked and connected to what the children's division does. And what children's leaders do is linked and connected to what student pastors do. And all these things are intricately connected to each other, and there is a interdependent relationship that exists. And the reason I want to just say this up front is because here's the thing I know. I will probably say some things today that you will disagree with, and that's okay. I say things sometimes I disagree with. I will hear myself say something and I go, I'm not even sure I agree with that, but that's okay. Because we're in a room of leaders who are Christians, and we can think out loud, we can ask hard questions, we can turn over rocks and see what's really there, because there's too much at stake for us not to ask hard questions about our strategy, because we need to make sure we're good stewards of the generation that's coming along behind us. It's okay if you disagree with me. What I hope and what I pray, and this is kind of my goal, I would rather you disagree with me and agree with each other than for you to walk away from here and not have spent the time, at least when you get back home, to sit around the table and get on the same page as a team. That's the most important thing you can do, to wrestle with some of these issues and some of these concepts so that you're on the same page. And here's another little hint about getting on the same page. It doesn't mean you have to agree with each other as it relates to everything, but when it comes to the values, when it comes to the principles, you're on the same page. Every once in a while, I'll have someone come up to me after a day like today, and they'll say, how do I get my executive pastor to get this, or how do I get the student pastor to get this, or how do I get the children's pastor to get this, because I really want them to get this. And my question back to them is always this: get what? Is it a schedule change you're trying to get them to get? Is it a program that you're trying to get them to get? Or is it a 40,000-foot view principle? Because if we were to lay the principles out, I think all of us would be on the same page. I don't think there's anyone in this room who would disagree with the statement that 100 years from now, the only thing that matters is someone's relationship with God. No one would disagree with that. Not only that, I think every one of you in this room would probably agree with the fact that no one has more potential to influence a child than their parent. Now, it can be negative influence or positive influence, but the bottom line is, surely because of the nature of what family is, parents have more potential to influence their children than anyone else on the planet. And the third thing I think we'd all agree about is this, and it almost seems like it contradicts the first thing I said or the second thing I said, that a parent is not the only influence a child needs. You see, that's why we have this statement: design a strategy. A strategy to do what? To combine the family, that group that has more potential to influence a child than any other group, with the community of faith, because a parent is not the only influence a child needs, and there is a sense in which the community of faith is a priority in the life of a kid if we're going to help shape their faith, that both are true at the same time, so that you can demonstrate the message of God's story. You are stewards of timeless truth, and we're going to talk about that today. You have an opportunity in a window of time in the life of a child or a teenager to help them understand how to connect the dots of God's story in their life and what God is trying to say in their life, and to connect them to His truth and how that shapes their worldview to see the world in a different way. Why? So one day, they'll be like these college students who stood up a while ago, and they'll understand what it means to be the church. You see, your job and my job isn't to educate a generation. It's to mobilize a generation. And somewhere along the line, I'm not really sure where it happened in our world, but somewhere along the line, it was so easy for us to shift in our churches to somehow defining for a generation that church was something they attend, that it was something they go to, that it was something they participated in, instead of them understanding how to be the church. And that your goal and my goal is to launch a generation so they understand what it means not to go to church, but to be the church. So as we wrestle with some of these issues, every question that we get, every time we go into any region or any part of the country and people start shooting questions, the thing that we've observed is almost every question comes back to strategic, a strategy question. It comes back to a message question: how am I crafting truth? And so it comes back to how do I partner with families and get parents on the same page? To how do I put leaders in the lives of kids, and what is that volunteerism, and how am I recruiting leaders to do something more than just teaching truth but discipling? And how do I launch a generation to really be the church?